aim was to equip the students with the ability to use the design tools in their own ways, so that they could address not only this issue, but also any other future challenges.
Can you tell us about your experience in running this design training course in a foreign culture, and also about some of the challenges you faced in conducting simultaneous workshops over 2 days?
Logistically, it was a nightmare to try and pull together getting things like visas, navigating and negotiating across different countries. All of the people that I worked with, so Chrsytia and Beatrice, as well as the Japanese people and the Pakistani people, were all in different time zones. So trying to even do the preparation work, even just setting up a video conference, you've got 3 different parts of the world where it's almost impossible to get time zones where people are in some sort of sensible way. So all of that stuff was really, really hard. Security was hard. So, and at every step, I think we felt like we were being blocked. So that was, and aside from the fact that the funding and everything was really hard to pull together. So it was a real challenge. But then working with the students themselves, they were very enthusiastic, but culturally, they're very slow to respond to things. So punctuality, for example, is not seen as important. I know that was one of the things we found a little bit frustrating at times, is we'd be trying to start the course at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and people would be still turning up at 10. And that seemed to be normal because they're so used to this congestion and traffic and those types of things that always delay things in their lives. So they're all just very accepting about it, and we were very frustrated because we wanted to start things and do things on time.
I think for me personally, it was a culture shock. Flying into Karachi and then taking the taxi to the hotel. And as a visual person and as a photographer and one of the content generators in this team, I think, the first time I saw a man on a motorcycle with 4 kids attached to him in front and back, no helmets, flying past the taxi I was in, and my mouth just dropped. And I thought, wow, I'm not in Ottawa, Canada any longer, where the regulatory structures and the policing systems, work fine. And it was just me getting used to not having, and because of the nature of how we were organized and who we were working with, the natural freedom to be able to move anywhere I wanted to, and to be able to capture life and that experience, that cultural experience through my lens. So I had to become more creative. Actually, I had to figure out, how do I tell a story while I'm in an SUV with 2 armed guards, one in front of me and one behind me, bearing guns, and and that was the experience for most of the 2 weeks. Whether they really wanted to be there, they saw that as an opportunity. Others were kind of off the fence. So, Joe's style at the beginning was deliberately lecture based to start getting information across in the first day or so, and then intercede that with hands-on learning as you go through it, and more so, and then instituting sort of the client job, if you will, of developing a financial services app, a digital app, which both of us agreed was not necessarily where we should have collectively and intuitively or professionally actually started. Is starting from what is the problem and then working forward in a typical design context. But no, so there was this sort of duality happening at the same time, and I think the language barrier played a huge role in I think the level of ownership at the early stages and getting greater and understanding. And I also feel like that happened with our Japanese hosts, our funders as well, to a certain extent.
That was the other complication, is we had the Japanese culture as well as the Pakistani culture that we had to deal with, and our hosts were wonderful. Like it's just it was really hard to navigate the different cultures and ensure that we were respectful in all aspects to all people. It was a real challenge, and to be teaching, being that, have that on at that time, like that brain, that mindset, that hat on, and then turn around and also be all these other things as well, be the research. So it was a very
work with what's in front of you. And you know, you're also each dealing with those multiple dynamics in terms of your own self-talk and observation, as well as trying to respond to and read appropriately the dynamics and context in the room.
Yes.
And the different things that might be at play that influence that.
The dynamics in the room were unusual. Yes, they were uneven. And what was surprising for me was that it was the females who did most of the talking and were the most open and assertive in the room, whereas the males sat back and let the women lead the conversation, which was really unexpected. All of the men that we dealt with were really
passive,
accommodating. They were very respectful. They were always looking out to make sure that we were comfortable, that we had everything that we needed, and maybe that had something to do with the fact that we're Western people and Western women. With the men in the class, I was surprised at how passive they were. And that was one of the things I had to actually try and accommodate and actually draw the men into the conversation.
What did you take away from, you know, the insights about the different tools that you were trying to work with?
Well, from my point of view, I was very excited to be able to run these three things in parallel, because it just doesn't happen very often. And I invested personally in making this happen so that we would have a really good opportunity to compare the three in a very difficult situation. I found, I had never used the CNET technique before, which was very much about people drawing their own experiences and telling stories with pictures. Chrsytia is a very experienced Lego serious play facilitator, so she was quite comfortable in that. And Beatrice has also done a lot of ethnographic study and research, so she was quite comfortable with that. So I was very, very keen to put these together. And what I found was they all were brilliant.
The context is very important. So us going out there with the locals into the community and being in the slums yielded insights that just could not have been gathered or even guessed with the same women coming into a clean environment, because we basically worked in a university in Karachi, which was quite top end, and it veiled a bit of the difficulties people actually experience in the real world. We saw rooms that were workplaces that had no windows, and you could really then understand the impost it would be, or the impact that if they don't have any power.
When I led the Lego Serious Play session for the 2 days, we had a really interesting setup, the way we had organized, Joe had organized the flow through the student designers through these experiences. So basically over the course of 2 days, all the students, I think all the students went through the LSP course, the sessions. So, and the way it worked was I had 4 groups of women from essentially the slums of Karachi with me, 20 women for 2 days. And in the LSP session, each team, there was teams of 5 women at a table. They were assigned a student designer, and that student designer's role was to take notes, handwritten notes, and we also audio taped them, so we taped the conversations. That was part of the design plan. It was amazing. I think for me, what was funny, and I was almost trying to prove or disprove some of the commentary that I had heard prior to going in from some of the students, and they were predominantly male students. And I remember one of them saying to me, beginning of the session, of the design session, before the Lego Sears Play dates, saying, well, how are these women who are basically illiterate going to do this, playing with Lego?
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I said, just watch. And that's exactly what happened. The cultural barriers, the language barriers, they all slipped away very, very easily in the first hour or so that I was working with them. We had translators to support us. Which meant we needed to block in more time to be able to convey the messaging. But as soon as they understood, actually did something, built a model at the beginning, built their own model, the level of being afraid of touching the Lego bricks dissipated. Gender dissipated. It didn't matter. For those women who were there, who were constructing their metaphors and of their reality, it's a universal human experience. And the challenge for us was to capture as much of the insight and the qualitative insight in data as possible while teaching the students. So I think, at the end of the day, it just proved to me that this particular technique can be taken anywhere in the world, done properly with the right cultural nuancing, and as Jo did with the Scene It materials, where she customized them to make sure that they were culturally relevant. This kind of work can be groundbreaking.
Through the process and the technique in half the time that I had allowed. So I was able to do further activities with my women. I was able to run some journey mapping and do some other things with these women, which gave us, again, a wealth of data. But from my perspective, the ethnographic stuff was, and this is part of what we've reflected in the paper, is the experience of actually going and feeling and sensing, smelling, hearing, not just visually seeing what was happening in photos, but going out and actually being present in this environment seemed to have a massive impact on the students. And that was an emotional thing. The emotional connection that they made with people by going out into their lives. The ethnographic things seemed to have more salience, I guess you'd say. It's stuck in the students' minds, so that they were able to easily and quickly access the information or the data that they had learnt, rather than with the other techniques. You had to go and study the materials. You had to study the data to be able to use the data in their designs. Whereas the ethnographic material, it was like they just absorbed it.
But the actual construction of the model of those 2 weeks, where the teaching model and the doing model at the same time as part of the teaching for a real client. Like, we're not talking a make-believe project for make-believe. This is the real client in a real high growth sector in that national economy.
Actually, my favourite part about it was the fact that I was able to actually bring all of these people together to work together in that environment. That to me was just fabulous. We worked with these brilliant women in Pakistan. It just was like one of those magical moments where everything comes together. And even though there were all these, and there was a challenge every day, as you remember, like there was always something going wrong. It was actually a bit of an adventure. It was, I think I just saw it as it was a wonderful experience.